Well, Chairman Patrick and Commissioners, thank you for inviting me to appear here today. My name is Alyza Lewin, and I am president of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, a nonprofit legal advocacy organization that's headquartered here in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to advance the civil and human rights of the Jewish people and promote justice for all. In addition, I have a law practice, together with my father, Nathan Lewin, where we have handled numerous religious liberty matters and where I had the privilege to argue the case of Zivotofsky versus Kerry before the U.S. Supreme Court. That case, which involved the right of an American citizen born in Jerusalem to list Israel as the place of birth on his U.S. passport, paved the way for President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And I'm honored to have been appointed by President Trump to serve on the legal advisory board of this commission. I've joined this panel to share with you how K-12 public schools are not immune from the severe spike in anti-Semitism afflicting this country. At the Brandeis Center, we hear almost every day from students and parents who have been targeted on the basis of their actual or perceived shared Jewish ancestry. For example, in Massachusetts, Jewish students were subjected to repeated bullying and harassment, including by students who gave Nazi salutes in the hallways, divided themselves into teams called Team Auschwitz and Team Hamas during athletic games. They drew swastikas on notebooks and on school property, and they used anti-Semitic slurs, including kike, dirty Jew, and go to the gas chamber. At a public school in North Carolina, a middle school student who was not Jewish, but who wore an Israeli baseball jersey, team jersey, to school one day and was thereafter perceived to be Jewish, for the next 2 years, his classmates persistently taunted and degraded him, referring to him as, quote, dirty Jew and filthy Jew. They invoke classic anti-Semitic stereotypes about Jews and money by calling the student, and I quote, a penny picker-upper. And they invoke the Holocaust by telling the student to, and these are quotes, get in a gas chamber, go back to your concentration camp, go to your oven, Jew, the oven is that way, and go die, Jew. And in California, a 6-year-old first grader at a public elementary school overheard older children on the playground say that Jews are stupid, and then went home visibly distressed and told his parents that he wished he was not Jewish because people don't like Jews. I was also reminded earlier when we heard the testimony of another client of the Brandeis Center, also in California, a Jewish Israeli high school student who was reprimanded after singing a song in Hebrew in her school's talent show. An administrator told her that she was, quote, in big trouble and that there will be consequences because her song allegedly made students feel unsafe and uncomfortable. Never mind that other students at the talent show sung songs in other languages, including Spanish and Korean, and that the song that she sang was a love song. But the fact that she sang it in Hebrew, her native language and the ancestral language of the Jewish people, the language of the Bible, made it something to reprimand and punish her, potentially punish her for. So these are just a few of the many stories that the Brandeis Center has heard and included in complaints that we have filed on behalf of K-12 parents and students. And I should say that in both the Massachusetts and the North Carolina stories that I described, that bullying went on for a couple of years, and the school did nothing to address the anti-Semitism. And at the end, both students felt compelled to leave the schools and had to transfer to other schools. This increased hostility towards Jews has not happened in a vacuum. It's facilitated by a deliberate, systematic effort to erase and deny the Jewish people's religious, cultural, ethnic, and ancestral history in the land of Israel. In a growing number of K-12 classes today, Jews and Israelis are portrayed as colonizers and oppressors, guilty of a litany of evils. But it's not possible to colonize a place that your ancestors are from. You cannot call Jews colonizers without first erasing the Bible and centuries of Jewish history. There is a term for this, and it's called erasive anti-Semitism. This anti-Semitism ignores evidence of the Jewish people's ancient and continuous presence in the land of Israel, including evidence exhibited here in the Museum of the Bible. Erasive anti-Semitism erases and denies who Jews really are and creates a false, evil narrative in its place, indoctrinating students and the school community to hate Jews. So how should we address this? Well, first, we must develop a zero tolerance for erasive anti-Semitism. We have to push back against those who rewrite history and deny the Jewish people's ancestral connection to their biblical homeland. Second, we need to hold the bullies accountable. Far too often, schools seek to address the situation by removing the Jewish students from the hostile environment rather than by ending the harassment that the Jewish students have endured. For example, schools have offered to take Jewish students out of a particular class or arrange for private tutoring or even permit a Jewish student to study from home. These, however, are not solutions because they isolate and ostracize the Jewish students while failing to address the underlying Jew hatred. Third, we need to institute effective training to educate the school community to recognize contemporary manifestations of anti-Semitism. We need to teach students, faculty, and staff that it is never okay to demand that Jews disavow their history and heritage in order to be accepted. We have seen the wave of anti-Semitism sweeping across college and university campuses, particularly in the aftermath of the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023. If we want to turn that tide, we must ensure that our elementary, middle, and high schools are not teaching our children to hate. We need to empower our students to recognize the myths and seek truth. So let me close with a quote from the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, which includes the United Kingdom. Rabbi Sacks once noted, when commenting on anti-Semitism, that irrational hate does not die. But then he continued and he added, and I quote, "But neither does the Jewish people. Attacked so many times over the centuries, it still lives, giving testimony to the victory of the God of love over the myths and madness of hate," close quote. And so I suggest to you that Rabbi Sacks's words sum up the task of this commission and our task today, which is to help ensure the victory of the God of love over the myths and madness of hate. Thank you.
Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil.
Thank you so much for what you were saying. You probably know that I'm very focused on this. I've spent most of my life since I was 10 or 12 years old focused on why people do what they do and don't do what they don't do. Probably pretty weird looking kid at the time for doing that at that age, but I'm really interested in what you think in this country the motivation is behind this anti-Semitism. I know how it expresses itself. You just gave us horrific examples of it, but I'm curious what you think the motivation is that makes young people invest this kind of energy in this sort of thing against their Jewish contemporaries. What do you think is motivating this?
So when it comes to the young children, I actually think I think it's part of what they are now being taught by the older people. But I think that the way anti-Semitism has historically worked is that whenever a society is unhealthy and it looks for someone to blame, the Jews become that scapegoat. And so I think that when you have an unhealthy society, and that's what's happened now, again, the Jews have become the scapegoat.
But why? Why the Jews instead of some other group? Is it because of this hard work and ethic and success?
I think that historically it's because the Jews have been the ones who've been courageous enough to maintain difference. And people suspect those who are different. And so throughout history, Jews, whether through their faith, through their religious practice, have been actually different from the rest of society, right? They keep their own strict dietary rules. They in some communities will dress a certain way. They have their Sabbath, right? And so the Jews are different. And if the Jews are different, it's always easier to scapegoat the group that's different.
So fear motivation.
I think it's fear. And I think that what happens now is I actually think that you have some who really do believe and engage in the Jew hatred, but you have an awful lot who are just kind of surrounded that group. And because of the way it's been messaged, right, to these students, as I say, there's this false narrative of what a Jew is. And so these students are actually being taught that the Jews are evil. And so if the Jews are evil and you want utopia, you want a better world, then let's push the Jews out of society and then we'll have that better world because they're the ones making it bad. And that's the problem. They don't understand the truth and they don't realize that what is being taught to them is an anti-Semitic stereotype and mischaracterization of who Jews really are.
Because of late, it's oppressed and oppressor. Everybody's either oppressed or oppressor, and so they're cast in that light. But
Exactly.
The fear of the difference and the unknown, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm going to disagree. There are a lot of people that are different. It's not just the Jews are different. What makes the Jews particularly different and despised throughout history is because God loves the Jews, and the hatred of God focuses on the hatred of those whom he loves. So in history, that's been mostly Jews, also sincere, devout Christians. It is a spiritual issue.
Thank you, Eric. Ms. Lewin, the reason this rest of this panel is higher ed, but it was important to bring her because there's a sense in this country today that anti-Semitism is only at higher education. No, it's through K through 12 also. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, who is a member of our committee, couldn't be here today, but we are going to do a broader panel on anti-Semitism at one of our future